Hi there. In the course of my investigation of Martinism, um, I went on a very good podcast by Talk Gnosis. Someone there said that in order to be a Martinist, you'd have to be comfortable with Judaeo-Christian symbolism, at the very least, and be a theist as well. And this got me contemplating not only what might be meant by that statement, but also my own emergence into theism and possible emergence into Martinism. I started off in life, when I was young, I joined an evangelical fundamentalist Pentecostalist church called the Assembly of God. And the interesting thing about that is what I seem to, my impression of fundamentalists generally, fundamentalist Christians, is it was a sort of what I call quasi-literalism. So Jesus was a quasi-literal figure. I mean, maybe they got it wrong. Maybe I didn't really understand what was being said to me, but my impression was that it was a sort of Father Christmas figure that was a sort of eye in the sky that kept an eye on you. And as the song says, he sort of keeps a record of whether you're being nice or naughty. So be nice for goodness sake. Sort of Santa Claus, Father Christmas. And you've got to believe in this literal figure. Otherwise, you don't conform to us. You're not part of our gang. You're not part of our tribe. So there's literally sort of a totemic God for the particular church tribe that I was a member of. I mean, obviously, they would say, well, there was a universal Jesus, obviously, which unites all Christians, except Catholics, of course, who worship the Antichrist. But apart from that, apart from Catholics, millions and millions and millions of Catholics are excluded from this covenant, you have this idea of a sort of, you kind of have to believe in this figure as being a sort of real and existent. That's why I call it quasi-literalism, because it's sort of totemic as well. A bit hard to describe, really. And I was very uncomfortable with this whole thing. So, of course, I reacted against that and reacted to what I perceived was repression and suppression. And I became very interested in Thelema, and Thelema is broadly atheistic, although I suppose it's Buddhistic as well, I suppose. So the idea of the Buddha is that there's no God but self. And Thelema is a similar idea to that, really. A man is God. And if Jesus and Christ are symbols only, symbols relating to our facets of the higher self, that which we would become, or will become, or shall become, or whatever. So looking at Jesus simply as a symbol of getting in touch, I suppose, with some aspect of your higher self. And that went on for many years, sort of on and off. And then, of course, I took a degree in religious studies at the university. And that's where I was introduced to the idea of, was Jesus an historical figure? And the evolution of the Gospels and, Q and all that kind of stuff. And so I was kind of, I went from being very comfortable with the idea that Jesus was just a symbol to then being sort of rather agnostic about Jesus as an historical figure. Again, I felt that the lecturers who were Christians there were trying to make Jesus into this quasi-literal figure that I'd rejected before when I was young. So let us say I'm certainly agnostic about the historical Jesus. There could have been one one or more historical Jesuses knocking around the place. And a lot of words were ascribed to this historical Jesus, who may or may not have been a teacher, a rabbi, or revolutionary figure, take your pick, sort of thing. So I'm sort of comfortable because I don't mind Jesus being an historical figure. I don't mind Jesus being I don't mind there being several figures called Jesus who have this historicity attached to them. But I'm sort of agnostic about that, really. But then later on, I sort of become more comfortable with the idea that Jesus is on one hand a symbol, but then in the classical Gnostic sense that Jesus is a spirit, is the logos that appeared as a spiritual apparition to people during his ministry. He wasn't actually there. He had the appearance of being flesh and blood, but in fact he wasn't flesh and blood. He was only spirit, and that's because I take on board the classical Gnostic worldview that this world is matter is evil. In that sense, evil in quotation marks, I suppose, and spirit is good, and they don't mix. They don't mix; they overlay each other. So it was possible that Jesus was an overlay over matter, but not matter itself. On the other hand, I'm also increasingly comfortable with the fact that, as somebody said to me, a Christian mystic said to me, that Jesus is the focus or the focal point for miracles and the miraculous, which is when you take matter, the laws of physics, the laws of chemistry, the laws of inevitability, the laws of causality, and you simply reverse them. You turn them upside down, and then it's possible for anything to happen. And the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, the work of Christ, the miracles of the resurrection, are miracles that just happen. And they happen at the same time as death. They happened at the same time as the non-miraculous. So again, a sort of a bit like Necker's cube. You've got this Necker's cube, which is a famous ambiguous figure, which is a cube which I can't draw, obviously. But the point is that you put a point there, and is that dot? Is that dot on the back of the cube, or is it the front of the cube? And I haven't drawn it properly, so I'll draw it there. There's my little dot there. Is it on the surface that's closest to you, or is it on the surface of the cube that's furthest away from you? You see, it's an ambiguous figure, and so therefore the miraculous and the non-miraculous can exist side by side, as spirit and matter can exist side by side, and you don't know really which you're looking at. You can choose. You can either see something as being miraculous or non-miraculous. And literally, the two people will see the same thing in a different way. And then there's all this question about angles as well. You can see an object from different angles as well, depending on your psychological state, depending on your spiritual degree, I suppose. So you see the same object, or you read the same text in a different way from somebody else, simply because if your experience is different from them, and your perception is different from them. So all this, the fact that Jesus being a symbol, an esoteric symbol, Jesus being a focus for miracles, Jesus being pure spirit as opposed to matter, classical dualism of Gnosticism, and it all amounts to Jesus being a focal point for an entire mystery. Jesus is a mystery, the focal point for a mystery school, even. The sort of the master of mystery, as it were, the essence of something which is so mysterious that is beyond our conception altogether, and we have to be in a different state of consciousness, perhaps, in order to even get a glimpse of this inconceivability, as it were. So you have the idea of Jesus being the mystery, Um, so yes, I would say I am comfortable with that. I am comfortable with the Judeo-Christian symbolism, provided it stays symbolic, stays mysterious, stays miraculous, stays totally focused on the spiritual rather than the material. So we're not talking about materialized spirituality, which is what I think I experienced with the evangelical church originally, is a kind of materialism of spirituality, a totemic tribalism even, and an exclusivity, and even an elitism perhaps, which arises from some of the evangelical churches, that they consider themselves, the truth and the way. They say Jesus is the way, they quote that, but then it turns out that in fact they believe that they are the way. And so they actually almost, Jesus is diminished in their view because they're so exclusive, and because they're so non-Catholic, so non-universal. And that becomes something which I'm not comfortable with. And I'm not even comfortable with the fact that they point to the fact that Jesus is a historical figure, is that as if that justifies their quasi-literalism, which obviously it does. And then they can say, well, the miracles really happened, and become literal about everything. Whereas I want to remain partly symbolic, partly miraculous, and a whole lot of spiritual, and yes, mysterious as well. So I draw a line between the miraculous, mysterious, the symbolic, and the spiritual, and the quasi-literalism and the historicity of Jesus on the other. And I don't feel very comfortable with literalism, and I do feel quite comfortable with symbolism. But I didn't. The thing about it is, I didn't feel that symbolism was enough, if you know what I mean. I mean, a symbol stands for something that we can't conceive of, or stands in place of something. But I asked the question, logically enough, in place of what? Jesus is a symbol, but what is Jesus symbolizing? Is there Jesus, the symbol, but then is there the reality of Jesus underlying that symbol? And is there then a further layer after that, layers and layers and layers, until you get down sort of to the actual center of the onion, as it were, surrounded by all its layers of growth. And that center is a mysterious center, is a miraculous center, and is a transcendental center, or links you with a transcendental state or realm, or non-location, as somebody might say, that is utterly beyond the beyond, which I know Aleister Crowley hated. He said, "Stupid saying this beyond the beyond," and he didn't like that phrase at all. And there are technical reasons why he wouldn't like that phrase. And yet, I can't help feeling that this, is part. That there is a theistic basis to the symbol of Jesus, and there is a symbolic basis to the theism of Jesus, and the two kind of happily live side by side. They coalesce with each other, the symbolic and the real. And I feel comfortable with looking at the cube and not actually deciding whether the point is furthest away from me or closest to me, as in the Necker cube. Look up Necker cube and you'll get a better drawing. You'll see what I mean. It's an ambiguous figure. I don't mind it being ambiguous. I don't have to have a literalism. I don't have to have a Santa Claus looking at me and ticking off whether I've been naughty or nice. I know that to be naughty, as in, I don't know, dysfunctional or antisocial or repugnant to people, or just an arsehole, is no way to go. I don't need a literal Jesus to be sort of sitting on my shoulder, saying, "Oh, you don't do that." I already have an ethical base for my life. I don't need a sort of bogeyman to say, oh, tut, 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 you can't do that sort of thing, you can work out the ethics from a rational philosophical basis. So you don't need a literal Jesus for that. So having taken care of the ethical side of things, and you're determined to be ethical, or as ethical as you possibly can, given the fact that when scarcity comes along, we all get rather unethical about things because all of us want to survive by any means possible, which is what the demiurge does. The demiurge keeps on challenging us to be ethical, and would rather that we weren't ethical because he feeds off the energy of being aggressive and avaristic and etc. He feeds off the energy, so he would rather we wouldn't be ethical. So yes, lots of things come along, like for the coronavirus, to make people go into fear, and it's the fear that's the fodder for the demiurge. Be that as it may, though, the short answer is yes, I do feel quite comfortable with the symbolism of Judeo-Christianity. Having decided in my mind, where that symbolism is coming from and where it's actually going to. Whereas I thought myself when I was exposed to Judeo-Christianity in its sort of evangelical Pentecostalist form, I was sort of being dragged into something that I didn't understand, which not the same as a mystery, because a mystery is something you do understand intuitively, but I was being drawn into something that I really didn't understand, that it seemed to be rather frightening and rather disturbing to me, as if I was being sort of, I don't know, brainwashed into a sort of cult kind of thing. And I couldn't think, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't think, well, not think for myself, that's not even right. I just couldn't breathe for myself. Somebody had taken over my breathing for me, which was the congregation, which was the guy in charge of the congregation, and their fanaticism and their elitism, and their desire to control everything and control thoughts, based on, I presume, a fear of doing wrong, which I think if you have sorted out the ethical basis of your life through rational philosophical means, you don't have a fear of doing wrong, because it wouldn't make any sense to do wrong. And having decided, having reached a philosophical conclusion about ethics, it wouldn't make any sense to not be ethical unless you were literally high or drunk. So if you don't actually get high or drunk, then you're sort of yourself. You are your philosophical self, which is already decided on an ethical stance. But obviously, if you're high on Jesus because you're all sort of hyped up with the hype of fundamentalism, then it's possible that you'll do lots of totally unchristian things and unethical things, for that matter, and you won't know what you're doing at all, really, and you might be doing the will of somebody else, which is surely that's kind of being possessed. So I didn't like the fact that Jesus could possess me. I didn't like so as long as Judeo-Christianity stays away from literalism or quasi-literalism, as I might term it, being kind of at a loss to know what to describe this kind of fundamentalist belief. As long as it stays away from that, I'm comfortable to work with Jesus. And I know Jesus as a man, and I've already said somewhere that I don't like other men, so I have a problem with the gender. But see, when you look at Christ as a transgender figure, a trans-material figure, a spiritual figure, then gender politics don't come into it, or gender psychology doesn't come into it. It transcends psychology, it transcends subconscious, it transcends one's experience of men and manliness and worries about that. and you go beyond all that into the realm of heaven, which of course is beyond duality in any case. So I kind of, it was good to be asked the question, would you feel comfortable with Judeo-Christianity if you became a Martinist? Because it's a question that actually has opened up all this dialogue within me, and I'm kind of glad that I was asked the question. So very often, you can become a part of something which challenges you to challenges your core beliefs, and then when you meet that challenge, you can be a part of something, and not feel anxious and not feel sort of secretly resistant to the particular spiritual movement or group or whatever, which is something a lot of people experience as well. They join a group and they have this resistance and they have this suspicion. And in Wicca, we talk about perfect love and perfect trust. Okay, very important that you trust the people that are telling you what's round the bend in the river. Okay, it's very important that you trust the angels, the guardians, and the messengers of God, that they are trustworthy beings, and they have to prove that trustworthiness. Okay, you don't take it on faith. They have to prove that they are worthy of your trust and worthy of your love. Okay, and not just because they have power. Okay, that doesn't that's no criterion for being loved and respected as being powerful. In fact, if you look at Christ on the cross, then all that power is dissipated and it's gone. He's just a criminal being hung on a cross. Okay, so there's no power there. Admittedly, there is the resurrection, which is a miracle, but there's no power. So there's no, in a way, he's already worthy, I suppose, of love and trust because the power is not there. So the abuse is not possible. At least that's the theory anyway. But unfortunately, a lot of people are Christists. In other words, they see that belief in Jesus is a way to gain power over people, and worldly power and worldly goods. And those people are really heading towards a disaster, I have to say, an existential disaster, but also a disaster in terms of their relationship to the universe. And that obviously we can feel very uncomfortable about because we don't wish to follow them to that disastrous state. So thank you very much for joining me on this little spiritual journey through this during this video, and I hope again that my little ramblings or little bits of my ramblings could be of help to you on your journey.